The Great Surprise. In so many ways, this particular Friday was no different than any other. The Earth remained in the Goldilocks zone of space where life can exist. The laws of physics had not changed. Some of the 8 billion people had plans for the day, but most focused on the daily routines of life. Some felt full of love and life, but a great many suffered from some affliction. Many helped one another, but others did evil. It was the perfect day for the great surprise. The Capitol. At 9:58 a.m. Eastern, the Speaker looked at the monitor and was pleased. All but 2 of the House members were present, and all 100 of the senators were seated. As she had warned, the chamber doors were closed and locked, and the meeting was promptly called to order. The Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader summarized the work by college faculty and congressional staff to investigate the past misdeeds of previous presidents, deceased and those still living. They presented the findings of the House Subcommittee for Presidential Investigations and examples of several particularly despicable presidents. The subcommittee report recommended that Congress address these historical wrongs, as well as the many unreported wrongs probably committed by past presidents. The Senate Majority Leader wiped a tear from his eye as he said, "I am sad, no, I am ashamed to say that Congress never addressed these transgressions through impeachment proceedings. But now we have an opportunity to address this crisis. The Speaker and I implore our colleagues from the other party to join us in bringing justice for the people of America, justice that has been denied for too long. Let us work together today to right these wrongs from the past." The Speaker was clearly moved by his remarks. She rose to speak and used her hands dramatically to emphasize her message. Recognizing the solemnity of the day, she had selected a faux judge look, a long black dress with kimono sleeves and a black coronet upon her head. The Speaker proclaimed, "You have heard the evidence. It is time to act. The House of Representatives must return after a 30-minute lunch break and adopt omnibus articles of impeachment before we leave this hallowed chamber today. Due to the urgency of the situation, and in the interest of bipartisan unity, these impeachment articles must apply to all of the previous presidents of the United States. On Monday, the Senate will have the trial. Obviously, that will not take the full day. To avoid any potential conflict of interest and keep the Supreme Court out of politics, the Majority Leader and I call on the Vice President to preside over the Senate trial rather than the Chief Justice." As he observed the Speaker's performance, the C-SPAN camera operator noted the resemblance to Emperor Palpatine in the Star Wars movies. The Speaker paused for a brief sip of her favorite coffee and continued, "There are 45 minutes remaining before we adjourn for lunch at noon. We will allow members of Congress to present their views now. Each member is limited to 30 seconds. At first, these views showed overwhelming support for omnibus impeachment, but one representative from Florida disagreed. "It pains me greatly to see this body discussing whether to dishonor the great men who have served this nation. Each of us has taken the oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States." This representative did not complete his remarks. At 11:32 a.m. Eastern, he vanished in the twinkling of an eye. 68 of his House colleagues, 14 senators, and scores of aides, clerks, and security personnel vanished at the same moment. Lost in Queens. The new MSNBC cost reduction policies required that they drive together to the panel discussion. On Friday morning, the MSNBC cameraman, Larry, picked up the MSNBC show host in his old van. Neither of them had been to the Queens campus of the Rugged Cross Seminary and College before. They relied on the mapping and directions app on Larry's phone, which said they had plenty of time for the drive. Big mistake. He had not downloaded the newest map and directions app update to make route changes around protest events and active crime scenes. Twice they were forced to work their way through time-consuming detours. They were supposed to be there by 11 a.m., but arrived almost 30 minutes late. They clipped on their press badges and ran into the small auditorium. The discussion was underway, but had not reached the point where the audience would ask questions of the faith leaders. The MSNBC show host was there to ask perplexing and contentious questions that the network hoped would frustrate or humiliate the panelists. Others, planted in the small, socially distanced audience, would do the same. Larry was seated a few rows behind her and 20 feet to her right, to favor her good side for the camera. He would record the questions and the responses for use in a future exposé show. At 11:30, the panel moderator announced the start of the question time, and the MSNBC show host gave Larry the roll camera hand signal. As she turned from Larry toward the panelists, she heard a scream from the audience and a crash near her. The panelists were gone. They had vanished from her view. The crash was Larry's camera falling onto a seat and bouncing to the floor. He also had left the building at 11:32 a.m. Right path. Levi Katz was proud of what the Lifeline team had accomplished in such a short time. It had taken many hours of his time, on top of his usual service at Beth Ariel Messianic Congregation and the periodic public events connected with his new book, God's Message to Daniel and Us. Lifeline was a worthwhile project, and he regularly prayed that God would put it to good use in his call to the lost sheep. Now that the demands of Lifeline and Daniel were diminished, Levi wanted to devote more time toward Libby and their 2 daughters. This morning, they were all in Kittatinny Valley State Park for a 5-mile hike. With a break for the lunch he carried on his back, it would take about 3 hours. Levi had not taken this particular hike before. It looked pretty straightforward on his map and the online hiking trails website. The trail signs were good, but the family found an unmarked fork in the trail not shown on his map. That turned out to be of no consequence, as it was 11:32 a.m. and they all had selected the right path years earlier. A squirrel observed their disappearance, but was not concerned by the unusual event. He nosed around in the knapsack, looking for a treat.